Hi, Leonid. How are you?
Okay, very happy to be with you today, and we have
Me too.
tons of things to cover, right? So you see, again, it's a really an
Too
interesting
much.
experience. So that the more you dig into it,
Yes.
the more things you kind of extract onto the surface. So
That's the idea.
yes,
Today, I wanted to ask you about a subject that it's most of the time invisible, that no one talks about. It's we, the caregivers, because we always focus on the quality of life and the performance of the child that has a disability. But what happens with the person that is taking care or of her or him?
well, absolutely. So this is really a great perspective, and it's true. So as we're getting back to the fundamentals of the parenting instincts playing tricks on you, right? So the moment you are in that baby mode, right, it's the mother ready to sacrifice herself, right? So basically for whatever, giving even her life for a child, right? But it's important to understand these mechanisms are designed to be the emergency procedures, right? It's the extremes. And when you are in that mode on a 24/7 and then month after month and month after month, it's not supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
And
Actually, the literature says that after 5 years of that high level of stress, there is the syndrome of caregivers,
absolutely,
the caregiver syndrome.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's also, if you look also at the things related to even the hormonal base, right? So if you look at that
Mm.
transition, say for instance, which also explains a lot in terms of the difference, how, for instance, when we get to the caregivers, right, how the mothers and fathers respond
Yes.
to the entire situation. So one of my colleagues in Antwerp, right? So Jan Eskens, we've been talking about with him on these points, and he brought my attention to the fact that you see we shouldn't forget that right after the baby is born, the mothers they have the significantly higher level of the oxytocin, right? So you see that's the kind of the hormone of bond and connection and so on. So which would be up to 8 times as high as it is in men. But the thing is that by the end of the sort of first year or even like 9 months, there has to be this phase of a separation of a mother from a child. So where the oxytocin level has to go down, 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 and kind of get to the more or less normal things, right? So you see, if you think about it, it's that's the way how it works in nature. If you watch any kind of this Animal Planet type of things, what happens is, for instance, in the first year of life, I don't know, say a lioness is ready to give up her own life for her cubs, right?
Yes.
But then when the cubs are 2 years old or when they grow 2 years old, let's say basically they will fight for territory or whatever, right? So what happens? It's actually to a great extent the hormonal balance has changed, and now they are being the external factors rather than the internal ones. And this is also one of the critical things that happen in the way how actually many families are ruined. Is that the mother with that high level of oxytocin which never went down because the child still stays in the baby phase actually considers the father to be not engaged enough. So he's not being as engaged, he's being for her who is so close with that level, from the, if you think that your bond hormone is 8 to 10 times higher than the one of the father, you know, whatever he does looks like too little, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this is really in one of those big things that happen even later, let's say in the later things, that it's really important to understand those mechanisms, right? But again, to understand those mechanisms, this is where we have to look at the whole thing and understand that we don't have a child in vacuum. The child and the parents, that's a unit. That's the indivisible ecological sphere. Right, so you see, you are ecologically connected to each other. There is, and as parents of the CP child, you know that it's really impossible to fool them, right? So they sense those, your moods or the total atmosphere in the house, even below the well before the non-verbal level, right? So you see, they pick it up, like whatever, like. Cats pick up earthquakes, right? So you see, like, they leave the building several minutes before it happens. So you see, in that sense, you can often see how the child, especially the quadriplegic child, has this kind of special sensitivity. They feel that storm or some emotional thing that is going to happen in the family, like way before it actually happens, right? So that's why this ecological understanding is really critical. And that's why when it's important to realize the two things. On the one hand, you can't fool the child. On the other hand, you need to start separation. You need to start separating from each other. So your hormones will be against it. They will be all drawing you, this is my baby needs my protection. I'm ready to keep sacrificing. And as long as
and that can take 80 years.
Of course, as long as you have any fuel left in your tank, you will still keep trying to do that. That will be that bond. So that's why it's really important to understand there is nothing wrong. If this separation doesn't happen naturally, that level of a certain separation and building the private space, both for you and for the child, is absolutely critical. Allowing privacy, allowing that private space is not abandonment. It's not, source of being guilty. It's not wrong. It's actually right.
And it's not a privilege neither. It's necessary.
Absolutely.
You have to keep that distance, because also we're talking about a situation that is long term. So in 10 years, in 20 years, I cannot continue to live without having, for instance, privacy, time to rest, time to develop as myself, as Sonia, and not only the mother of Rocíos.
Oh, absolutely. But you see, I would say that you are a little bit overshooting here, right? So you see, the reality is that those cycles are much shorter, right? So you see, those evolutions, they actually have to happen even not on the big scale, which is given, right? But it actually has to happen there on a much smaller scale of months. So, and you need to have that special private space within the day for yourself, and you need to give that space to a child. And again, it shouldn't be forceful, it should be natural. You should be looking for those opportunities. It's not that you kind of preset and say, what, now, Rocio, for the next 2 hours you will be alone in this room. You are supposed to be, and if you're not happy, toughen up, right?
You're a grown-up.
You're a grown-up, or whatever. But things don't work like that. It's sensing the opportunities, it's the timing and so on, right? So you see, it's gradually getting in such a way, because you see, one of the key points, right? And for instance, this simple thing. When you are in the apartment, when you are in the house, even you may be in, in your office room, right, working or doing something else, and she's like 10 meters away from you and you are being quiet and not heard, it's a completely different atmosphere from when you have left and kind of the door got locked. So It's just the very fact of your presence, however distant is there, but it's the presence itself which actually makes a huge difference for a child. So finding those right moments and right balances of what makes the privacy space, how intense is the privacy space, and so on, this is really critical. But the first point is to understand that, hey guys, both of you need the private space. And everyone in the family needs the private space. And then that private space, that you have to approach it from the perspective of respect for everyone, right? So you see, whether it's the father, whether it's the mother, whether it's the father plus the mother, whether it's the father with the child, whether it's the mother with the child, whether it's the other sibling with the child, each of you need special one-on-one connections. And it also happens very often that people, especially mothers, and get this picture of the happy family, like, okay, father, mother, one child, another child, everyone holding hand and kind of smiling for the photo, the ideal thing, all of us going to the zoo or kind of, let's say having a picnic on the green grass and the sun is shining. It's so difficult to make those different timings connect and intersect in one moment in time. So many things have been ruined by the best intentions and kind of this kind of Instagram type of picture. The thing is that everyone needs private space. A private space for the child with disability is special. You need to be aware of the different levels of privacy, different levels of connection, but that space is absolutely necessary, right? And at the same time, you need that private space, but not in 10 years, you need it today, right? So you see, you need those windows of private space today. You need them, on the daily scale, you need them on the weekly scale, you need them on the monthly scale, and so on. So in that sense, that is absolutely essential, because otherwise the situation becomes toxic. That's really the thing. You have to see it as a pond, as the ecology where there has to be flow, because the stale pond gets toxic. And
the thing is, the family is a system, an entire unit, and if any part it's not doing well, not only the child, but any part of the system is not doing well, it's not working at all for anybody.
And it would be felt. It would be felt by everybody through the system. So that's really. So this is really the thing, and that's what That's why when we talk about the whole life and the whole ecosystem, the ecosystem of the family, where you've got the child with the special needs, especially if the child, with a more severe disability. Of course, there is a different requirements for care and so on. But my point is simple. On the other hand, you have much clearer and much stronger opportunity to connect. Let's say all this kind of external doing things as then being set aside. It's not a curse. It's not the thing that, the arrival of the disabled child has ruined the family. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the, most of the cases, right? So we're facing the reality is that 90% of the marriages with a child born with a quadriplegic condition end up with a divorce. But my belief here is that a lot of those divorces actually come from this simple fact that it's just inability to distinguish the right places and the right ecology and the right interplay. And again, the sad reality is that, we're not prepared for that, right? We're not the descendants of there's nothing in our pre-wiring which teaches us to do so. And that's why it's important to understand this early rather than late. It's important to understand that each of the parents has their own type of connection, and there is no right and wrong. As long as there is a connection, right, there is no right and wrong. There has to be, as long as there is a will to connect and participate and so on. But each of you absolutely should have that private space and develop through it. So this is absolutely critical.
and we should worry about the quality of life and happiness of everybody in that family system.
Because the quality of
That's
life belongs to the system. It doesn't belong, it's impossible to say, well, we have given us all to give the better life to a child.
yeah,
It doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And
precisely.
it's a fake thing, right? So again, my point is simple. The child, even a severely disabled child, if you just calm down, slow things down, meet them where they are becoming robust quite quickly. Once the child is robust, life is much easier. You don't, a lot of people shoot themselves in the foot by not being able to just meet the child where they are, and either going to that either overprotective or the Paralympic and so on. So there's all sorts of disturbances that actually ruin the balance. It's not that difficult. If there is a will, if there is a desire, there is not that difficult. It's not impossible. So it's just important to understand that you can't, you can't wing it, right? So you can't just do it on instincts. You have to slow down. You have to understand that you're facing a challenge. It's not a disaster. It's a challenge, right? Which has the opportunities. So this crisis has its opportunities, but you have to be smart. You have to take on board that you have to evolve. Your total family unit have to evolve. You have to reevaluate the roles, connections, and so on. You can't go just kind of with the flow. You have to be
Yeah, you have to
smarter.
learn new skills
You
too.
have to learn new skills, absolutely. But then the reward for this is huge.
Absolutely. Okay, I think that's a lot to process. So we should end it here.
And
But look forward for the next one.
absolutely. Take care
Okay,
and
bye.
evolve.